Good evening, Alberta. I am Najwan Al-Junaid, the MLA from Calgary-Glenmore. It is a pleasure to be with you here tonight in the town hall with Naheed Nenshi. We are broadcasting live from the Rapid Fire Exchange Theatre right here in Edmonton. So hi, Naheed.
Hey, isn't it great to be here?
It's lovely. Good to see you.
Good to see you, except, there is a hockey game. Oh. So we're from Calgary. We don't know about this. So apparently there is hockey in May in some places. So yeah. If you got to go, you got to go. We'll have this recorded later, but stick with us for a while. We're going to have a great conversation.
And I didn't bring my Flames jersey. Oops. Naheed, we are in Edmonton tonight, but our hearts are in Fort McMurray. We just learned that there is an evacuation happening. It started this afternoon. It actually happened while we were in question period.
Yeah.
So our hearts are with them, and we're feeling for them.
Yeah, our number one goal is to make sure that everyone stays safe. Sadly, we've had a lot of experience with dealing with this kind of emergency. It's a scary time. It's a difficult time for everyone. But the good news is we have brilliant public servants whose job it is to keep everyone safe. So please follow the evacuation notices as they come. We're going to look after you. The province is going to look after you. We'll get you back home. I know it's tough, but we're with you.
We're with you, and we hope you can get home very soon. While I'm privileged to live on Treaty 7, I'm here tonight on Treaty 6 land. Tonight we will be discussing Alberta's economic future, and our world is changing. And I think when we talk about the economy, we should recognize call to action number 92, which is centered around economic reconciliation. Call to action number 92 calls for ensuring that Indigenous communities have equitable access to jobs, training, and education opportunities, and that Indigenous communities gain long-term sustainable benefits from economic development projects. So we need to see more direct participation of Indigenous peoples in new energy projects, which means more engagement of corporate Canada, more action from our governments, and more awareness and learning from all of us. And what I'm personally learning from this work, that this work is really hard. And the path to truth and reconciliation is this continuous journey. It does not end by me doing a land acknowledgement or taking a course. So I invite you to start your own journey, no matter where you are, and to start learning more about economic reconciliation. And with that, I'd like to acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional territory of the Cree, the Nikodasio, the Dene, the Saulteaux, as well as the Métis and the Inuit who have lived in and cared for these lands for generations. So tonight's session is a vital one. We're here to tackle big questions about our province's future and how we can foster economic growth through innovation and decarbonization of oil and gas, embrace renewable and alternative energies, and improve everyday affordability for Albertans. We will also discuss the urgent need to respond to the global climate crisis, exploring actionable steps and strategies, and we will discuss all this with the one and only Naheed Nenshi. Naheed, I'm excited to be here with you tonight.
Thank you.
And I chose to support you for many reasons. I'm excited to support you because I believe you'll bring growth to the Alberta NDP. I believe you'll expand our support, and really this is about winning elections. So no pressure.
To win elections, to build a better Alberta. We have a government that only cares about winning for the sake of winning. Yes. At the moment, and we've got to be able to work together for a better place.
Absolutely. Thank you. And the party released the latest membership numbers.
Wow, right?
It's impressive. Yes, it's 85,144 members. And when I see a surge in Calgary, that's for sure the Nenshi effect. So that's great growth and good news. So congratulations. But it doesn't end there. People need to show up and vote. So I have to put this plug in there. So it's good to be here. And I'm going to just go through a few housekeeping
Can I just say a word about membership just before you do that, which is, I really want people to understand what a big deal this is, which is that when Rachel Notley stepped down from the NDP leadership in January, the membership of the party was about 8,000 people. Now, 8,000 had lapsed, but 8,000 active. It is now 10 times that. So it is not only the largest membership in the Alberta NDP history, it's quite possible that the Alberta NDP is now the largest provincial party in Canada.
Wow.
So that's exciting for the election. You got to vote. You'll get your ballots on June the 3rd in the mail, in the physical mail, with instructions on how to vote. But also what that means is we're creating a huge movement, because that has been across the whole province. In every constituency, we have new members. On our campaign, we signed up nearly 10,000 or maybe just over 10,000 volunteers. And this is the army that we need to keep working on for now and for the next 3.5 years until the election to ensure we're building that better Alberta. So I'm super excited about the numbers, but I'm mostly excited about what that means, that people are excited about building a better Alberta together. And to me, that's the movement that I'm thrilled about. But anyway, sorry, I'll let you keep going.
No, I am super excited. So thank you for highlighting that. So let's get to housekeeping. The town hall is about your participation. We want to hear from you. So please text your questions about the economy and energy, affordability, environment. These are the main topics for this town hall. And the number is displayed at the bottom of your screen. It is 587-406-1056. Once again, if you have questions, please text your name, location, and your question to this number. And we're coming to you from this beautiful theater, Rapid Fire Exchange Theater, a place known for quick and dynamic exchanges, much like the format of tonight's discussion. And we have some great volunteers standing by and will help to try to get and triage your questions about the topics just as they come. So we're ready for a lively and insightful discussion here.
Here we go.
Yeah. And just one last thing, please mention your name so we can acknowledge you right here on air. Okay, that was a lot of talking. I'm ready, and the Oilers are just hitting the ice shortly, so let's channel some of that game energy. Okay, let's do this.
Game day energy.
All right.
And you know, Najwan, I'm running for premier of the whole province.
Yes.
And they have hockey in the spring in Edmonton, so I've got to learn to say, go Oilers. But it's actually pretty exciting. It's a collection of talent on that team that's a once-in-a-generation talent, and it's time for them to get their due.
Go Oilers, okay.
Sorry, Calgary people.
We're trying, we're both, right. So the theme today is securing a more prosperous Alberta. The electricity system will evolve to be the backbone of the future energy system. This means we'll be plugging more and burning less fuels. And this is why grid decarbonization is important. So Naheed, what does securing a more prosperous, affordable, and sustainable future mean in the light of electrifying our economy?
You know, what a great question. And I am an electricity nerd. I don't know if people know that about me, but when I became mayor, I realized, well, now I'm the shareholder representative for an electrical utility, and I better figure out how electricity works. So I don't think you want Professor Nenshi's 101 on electricity here, but I will tell you this, which is that the demand for electricity is growing significantly as the economy electrifies. So if you think about in your own life, setting aside electrical vehicles, you can also think about the other things in your life that use electricity more than perhaps other forms of energy that we've used in the past. So not only is Alberta growing, but the demands on the electrical grid will continue to grow. And that means that we've got to modernize and expand and enhance the grid, the distribution and transmission networks, but also generation. And this is frustrating to me. And Najwan, you're kind of an expert in this field as well, and I'm sure it frustrates you. Because when we hear the Premier and the UCP talk about it, it's extremely clear to me that they don't actually know how the grid works. One of the reasons we're sitting here, that I'm sitting here with you, is because when it was so cold in January, and we went into electrical grid alerts, I realized that not only does the UCP not really understand the problem, but they were more interested in fighting with the federal government than in telling people, look, we're in a grid alert, you need to unplug your dishwasher, or you need to turn off your dishwasher right now. Because they don't believe in actually asking people to make these small sacrifices. They'd rather pick fights. And then when we went into a very rare Saturday alert, which means we were very close to overloading the entire grid, then they finally sent out a text message. But the interesting thing about that is I was really involved in that because I was trying to amplify their messaging to tell people what to do. And when I realized on a Saturday, because I do know the grid pretty well, when I realized if you've got a grid alert on a Saturday afternoon where people aren't coming home from work all at once and turning on the stove all at once, this is a really, really big problem. But I've got a friend who lives in Calgary, and out her window she can see a whole bunch of houses. And she said that within a minute of them sending that grid alert, she could see the lights go down. So to me, it's an example of how the government didn't know what they were doing, but also how asking people to take small efforts as a community can make a huge difference. Right. So back to the actual policy question here. Look, I'm going to say something shocking. The Premier's not wrong about one thing. And what she's not wrong about here is that the federal government's clean electricity regulations, their proposed draft clean electricity regulations, will be very, very difficult for Alberta to meet in that time span. Alberta, Saskatchewan, and either New Brunswick or Nova Scotia, I don't remember which, I think it's New Brunswick, are the ones that are going to have trouble. The other 7 provinces will not have a problem just because of the nature of our grid. But to me, that actually means this is an opportunity to sit down with Minister Wilkinson, the Minister of Energy, and say, let's create a system that works for us. And maybe it'll be a couple of years longer. Maybe it'll have a different path towards getting to a net zero carbon grid. But instead of doing that, the government just fights. And then the federal government has no incentive to change the regulations so that they work better for us. And it's a vicious circle that keeps going on and on. And I don't want to get into all the details of how it works, but when you hear the Premier blame renewables in the base for the problem in dispatchable energy, it's clear she doesn't know what she's talking about. And so as battery storage technology improves, then it is actually the case that solar and wind will be able to form some of the base load of generation. In other words, you store up the electricity when the sun is shining and you use it at night. It's a quite simple concept. That's coming. Yeah. But in the meantime, it is absolutely the case that we can abate some of our natural gas electricity generation, that it can be used for the peaks when we need it. That's what the system is designed to do now. And the grid alerts that we had in January were not because the sun wasn't shining at night. We knew that. The system is designed for that. It was because a couple of the natural gas plants went offline as well. And so we have to get that right. We have to have a partner in the federal government that's helping us think about how to get that right. And we have to have a regulatory system that doesn't pass extraordinary costs on to customers. So as you know, utility rates under the UCP have quadrupled. And it's not just because they took the cap off. It's because they designed a system that allows for economic withholding, which is a fancy way of saying the entire system is rigged to increase the price of electricity and take it to its maximum where it can. Rigged is probably the wrong word, but it's designed to increase the price of electricity to its maximum when needed. And they've announced some changes to that, but they've also done that in the context of this moratorium on renewables, which nobody asked for, which is leading to billions and billions of dollars, anywhere between $30 and $300 billion of investment and good jobs leaving the province because they need business certainty. And it's based on bad science. And let's just talk about the politics for a minute. We've known from almost the moment that this was announced that the Premier misled Albertans. She said the regulator, the AESO and the AUC, asked for it. And it became very clear very quickly that AESO and AUC didn't ask for it. She just made that up. And then stuff came out this week that showed that, in fact, it's even worse than that, that the CEO of the electrical system operator actually said this will throw business into a tailspin, we should not do it. And when the Premier was confronted on that, her story keeps changing. But at that point she said, oh, 5 guys I met told me, or maybe a guy she met at Five Guys Burgers told her. I don't know. Who were these mysterious 5 guys?
Yeah.
But she's taking us for fools. She didn't know what she was doing. She went into this thing, and to our friends in deep South Alberta, we've already lost a major investment in Cardston County from TransAlta and all the good jobs that go with it. And this is going to continue to happen. It's bad for property rights. It doesn't allow people to do what they need to do with their property across Alberta. It is massive government regulation and red tape. It is hugely authoritarian, and it's wrong for the grid by removing sources of power that are cheap in the long run. So all of it doesn't make sense, and we've got a lot more to do. Sorry, I know I go on and on about this.
No. So it's such an exciting topic always. It's also loss of municipal revenue in rural Alberta.
Oh, sure.
The rural economy.
You ask the reeve of, thank you. Okay, nobody can hear me now, John, which is probably better for everyone if no one can hear me.
No, it's great.
Thank you very much, Ryan.
Yeah.
Ryan is awesome, by the way. If you've been enjoying our video content on this campaign, that dude right there has been doing it. He is the best. So thank you, Ryan, for jumping in and doing that. So I'll start all over again on electricity. No, I won't. Hopefully people got some of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, when you listen to the reeve of Cardston County, he says, look, we were relying on this. We were relying on the tax revenue. We were relying on the jobs. Now what are we supposed to do? How do we pay for the infrastructure we need? And again, this government, this UCP government, is just not thinking about the future.
Yeah, and it's, for me, it's just shocking to see the Premier. She's always shocked that the sun doesn't shine all the time and the wind doesn't blow. Listen, with the grid, the focus should be increasing diversity on the grid. It has to be redundancy. It has to be this backup. You have a mix of energy sources, and you mentioned storage. Absolutely, we saw how it saved some and added to the load when we had the brownouts and the blackouts. Anyways, we can talk about electricity forever.
We sure could. We probably shouldn't.
Yes, because I'm seeing a lot of questions.
But it is true that the sun does not shine at night. This is true.
This is true. No, we have many questions on the CPP. Which
my
is
favorite topic.
Yes, it is related to the economy.
Yeah, of course it is.
I see Cheryl from Calgary. She has a question. Can you outline your plans to protect our CPP from governments moving forward?
I'm actually really happy that people are asking questions about this because I was worried that people had forgotten about this broken promise and this crazy attack from Danielle Smith. She said in the May election, no one is coming after your pensions. And then she went ahead and did it. And again, the thing about this government is that they take us for fools. They think they can say whatever and we will just all go, oh yeah, sure. So they put out this crazy study that somehow Alberta is, with 10% of the population of Canada, is entitled to 55% of the CPP. What does that really mean? It means to all the Albertans out there who have come here from other parts of Canada, from Saskatchewan, from the Atlantic provinces, it means that Danielle Smith wants to take the pension away from your grandma or the universities that you went to, or the investments that were made in you before you came to Alberta, and say, guys, you're on your own. So that's morally wrong, it's ethically wrong. But the other thing is nobody wants this. And so study after study, survey after survey, poll after poll shows that 70, 80% of Albertans are saying, please don't touch that pension. The CPP works, the returns are high, and it's gonna look after us in our retirement. So ultimately, hopefully, the Premier will just give up on this, but we know she doesn't give up on things. So if we do have a referendum, in the municipal elections in 2025, it means that we have to work hard as Albertans to make sure all of our friends and neighbors know to vote no in that referendum, to ensure that that does not happen. And certainly, people keep saying I'm not allowed to say if we take power in 2027, I'm supposed to say when we take power, but we're both Muslim and we know that if you say a good thing about the future, you're going to bring the wrath of God down on you. So I've landed on when we take power, God willing, inshallah.
Inshallah, okay.
When we take power, God willing, inshallah, then we are going to put a lockbox around the Canada Pension Plan so that it is protected and politicians can't mess with it anymore.
Excellent. Now, I think that was a fulsome answer. We have an off-topic question, but I think it's an important one, and we've seen a few. This is from Wendy. And she's asking, what would you do regarding the situation with student encampments on university campuses in Alberta that occurred this week?
Thanks, Wendy, for that question. Like so many of us, I've been really disturbed by what we saw, the pictures and the images that we saw from people who were there. You need to know I'm a former student leader. I have organized many peaceful protests. I have participated in many, many peaceful protests. In fact, a protest I organized was once on the front page of the New York Times and the Washington Post as one of the largest protests since the Vietnam War. So there's a role for this, and I believe in that. I believe in people's right to protest peacefully. And by the way, I also believe that people have the right to criticize protests that they disagree with, and certainly I've done that as well. This stuff really matters. But I was also the mayor. And when I was the mayor, we had to make some tough choices based on the police and what the police do. And it's important to note that despite what Danielle Smith wants with the provincial police, politicians should never direct the police. And so I'm very careful to point out that I wasn't there. I wasn't on the ground. I wasn't in the emergency operations center. I don't know what fact base led to what looks certainly on the surface like a really disproportionate response from the police. So I know that the NDP caucus has been calling for an investigation from ACERT, the Alberta Serious Investigations Response Team, Serious Incidents Response Team. And today the Premier and her minister said they would do that. So thanks for taking that suggestion. But that's quite narrow. ACERT's mandate will be to see if individual officers acted incorrectly or caused injury to participants. It's an important question. It has to be dealt with. It has to be investigated. But there are bigger questions here. There are bigger questions around what was the coordination between the universities and the police? What other legal options were considered? What other negotiations were held between the protesters and the police and the universities to try and de-escalate the situation? Who ultimately gave the orders for the flashbangs and the pepper ball guns and all of those things? These are questions that must be answered. And certainly the civilian police commissions in Calgary and Edmonton, who are the oversight body for the police, I really trust that they're going to ask these tough questions. But I'll also turn, and I'm an academic, as you know, and I know these two universities very well, but I will also turn to these two universities and say, folks, you've got to give us more. You've given us statements, but you have to help us understand your reasoning, what was happening, and you've got to be able to take questions. And this is really critical. But the thing I don't want to lose here, Najwan, is we have to remember the purpose of these protests. That in our community, people are deeply passionate about what they're seeing as extraordinary injustice. And they feel the need to speak. And you know what? That's the right thing to do. I want to remind everybody that as passions are running so high, and as we condemn what happened on October 7th, as we condemn everything that's happened since October 7th, we also have to remind ourselves that there is no place for anti-Semitism, there is no place for anti-Palestinian and anti-Arab racism, there is no place for Islamophobia in our community. And maybe this sounds naive, but living here, as a Muslim living here on this land, I've always thought that the greatest thing about this place is that we're able to show the world how we can live purposefully together. And so I'm really trying to invite people to turn to that rich tradition in Alberta and understand that we can disagree passionately, but all of us want peace. All of us want an end to the violence. And one way we can do this is to show the world how it is possible to live together. And I have the exact same message for Jewish communities as I have for Muslim communities, that we've got to figure out a way to move towards that peace and human rights that all of us are looking for. And that, to me, is the critical issue here that goes even deeper than what we saw on the campuses.
Well,
thank you for that question.
No, thank you for that response. I'm going to shift us back to the energy and economy. It's kind of hard after this conversation, but thank you. So Alberta is seen as an energy leader. We have oil and gas, we have oil sands. And, last month, Naheed, we wrapped up the provincial budget season. In our revenue section, there is a $12.5 billion in revenue from bitumen royalty alone.
Yes.
This is the reality of our economy in Alberta. We are prosperous because of resource revenue, and we do have a revenue diversity problem. in this province. So I call this the $12 billion challenge. And by the way, I am someone who worked in oil and gas and oil sands, and my family and I have enjoyed that prosperity that comes with working in this sector. So I'm always grateful for that. At the same time, we are experiencing a shift in the global economy. We have a climate crisis.
Yes.
So I have a couple of questions for you here, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. And I see some questions as well on energy and the environment. Industrial decarbonization policy is an economic policy. What we mean by industrial decarbonization is reducing emissions at scale from highly emitting sectors, so oil and gas, oil sands, manufacturing, transportation, electricity, of course, all that. So what do we need to reduce emissions at scale from these sectors?
Oh, there's so much in this question. And you have asked a specific question about industrial scale, and I'll come to it in a moment, but maybe I'll back up a little bit. I've also worked in the energy sector, in the oil and gas sector, and in the oil sands briefly, but I have a pretty good understanding of it. And the revenue question that you ask is both a blessing and a curse.
Yes.
Because, I worked hard with Rachel Notley, with the Prime Minister, to get that oil flowing through TMX, the Trans Mountain expansion, which started just last week or the week before. And that one project is expected to increase Canada's GDP by 25 basis points this quarter. In other words, that one project is going to massively improve our economy. And it also means that royalties to the Alberta government will increase as we decrease the price discount for Alberta oil to the rest of the world. Ask me how frustrating it is that for me that the Premier is going to take credit for that, even though she had nothing to do with it, but she's going to have a better looking balance sheet. The other important thing about understanding the royalty revenues that you mentioned is the royalty structure is such that a lot of the older oil sands projects are now paying a higher royalty rate because they paid off their initial capital. So for the very short, I shouldn't say for the very short term, for the immediate term, the Alberta budget's going to look pretty good. And this will continue for some time. I'm not one of those who thinks that we will not still need oil and gas for years and years to come. But the question we have to ask ourselves is, what do we do with that windfall? Clearly, we need to reinvest in public education and public health care. We need to do these things in a very big way. But we've got to get off that roller coaster, the resource roller coaster in our budget. We're not going to be on the roller coaster for much longer because those things are paying out now, but we also can't get addicted to that level of revenue. And yes, we have to beef up the Heritage Trust Fund. We have to ensure that we have dividends being paid from this money when we don't have it anymore to help us with our budget. So all of these things are critical, and you've got to have a very smart, practical view on budgeting, which we have not had for a long time in Alberta, let's be frank. And especially in the good times, because in the good times, we just pretend the good times are going to last forever. And right now, we're in a really interesting situation because if you look at the macroeconomic numbers, Alberta is booming. We're doing so well. But if you talk to people, people aren't feeling that wealth in their community, in their lives right now. And so we're in a difficult position where, again, you need smart, practical, thoughtful, pragmatic government to be able to move forward. Now, I want to address really quickly your question on large-scale emissions reductions. You know more about this than I do, probably. But remember, Alberta's TIER program was the first carbon price for large emitters. And regardless of what will happen federally, I cannot imagine that either Danielle Smith or any federal government will mess with the industrial emissions program. That's a big part of it, because pricing carbon from industrial emissions is the way that you would end up reducing the emissions in that way. I also believe, as I think many Albertans do, that we cannot be bystanders to climate change. We actually have to be leaders in this area. We have some of the smartest environmental engineers, smartest environmental scientists in the world working here in Alberta, because the problems are the biggest here. And if you're a big problem solver, you want to go where the problems are big. So we should be leading the world. We should have other oil producing regions look to us and say, that's how you deal with it. And we're doing a bit of it, and I'm a fan of some of the work that Pathways Alliance is doing. I think carbon capture, utilization, and storage is absolutely part of the solution. It's probably not the whole solution, but I don't know the other solutions because we have to make space for that kind of innovation. And if we just plug our ears and pretend there is no energy transition happening and that the word transition is a dirty word, as the government is doing, then we know that we'll never be able to get to that place at the top of the league tables where we are the most innovative in the world working on this, and we have to get back there.
No, it's defining the problem very well first in order to find the solutions. And we are part of the solution for the energy transition. And I want to thank Frank for his question. He had, I hope that was a fulsome answer for your question,
Thanks, Frank.
Yeah. I have Pamela from Cochrane, and her question is, what are your thoughts on the coal mining initiative plan for the eastern slopes of the Rocky Mountains?
Oh, you're going to get you're not going to get a long answer from me on this one because the answer is very simple. No. The previous coal policy made sense. It makes sense for us to draw lines. And one of those lines is we've got to protect the water. We have to protect the watersheds in southern Alberta. And the money from this just isn't worth it. And the fact that the Premier again takes us for fools and says, oh, allowing this mine to happen is just reclamation. Of course it is not. And this is not an uncontroversial thing to say. There's a lot of good jobs, and there's people in the Crow's Nest Pass who are saying we need these jobs. And there are, good unionized labor jobs here. But at the same time, sometimes you just got to draw the line. And for me, this is an easy one. This is where we draw the line.
Thank you. That was very eloquent. It's a no. Thank you. We have a question from Linda in Lethbridge. She's asking, how will you engage with rural and blue-collar Albertans?
Such an important question. And so if I can be a little bit critical of the election that you won in 2023, I feel like the Alberta NDP had too narrow a path to victory. And basically, we needed to win in every riding in which we were competitive in order to win. And part of that meant that we weren't as present as we needed to be in areas outside of Calgary and Edmonton. And I always hesitate to use the term rural Alberta because it's a huge diversity. There's big cities like Red Deer and Lethbridge, there's smaller towns, there's small communities, there's truly rural agricultural ranching folks. And you can't imagine that those are all the same, that the second you step out of the ring road in Calgary or Edmonton, you're in rural Alberta. I don't think a nurse working at the Red Deer Hospital will think of herself as rural, or even an oil field worker in Fort McMurray. So we've got to go to people in different ways. And it really starts with listening, and it starts with having conversations with people about what's important to them. We cannot show up, as progressives often do, and just say, why don't you people understand what's good for you? There's a very famous book, 25, 30 years old now, called What's the Trouble with Kansas? And it's trying to ask the question, why do these people vote against their self-interests? Look, there's a case to be made that this version of the conservative movement is not the Peter Lougheed or even the Ralph Klein version. There's a case to be made, what have you done for me lately? That we have folks who are deprioritizing rural health care. You can't get teachers in your kids' school. So, we've got schools across Alberta and smaller communities where the school is shrinking. They've got way fewer students than they had before, but the classes are still massive because there's not enough teachers. Even though they're funded, there's not enough teachers who are able to work in those places. And of course, if you have to drive by 2 or 3 closed emergency rooms to get to one that's open on a holiday long weekend, that healthcare system is not working for you. I've heard from people outside the major centers that they've been promised broadband for 30 years and they don't have it yet, which both doesn't allow you to participate in the global economy, but it also doesn't allow you to watch Netflix. And you feel even more isolated around what the conversation is in the rest of the world. So all of these things matter, but we can't go into these areas and start by saying, hey, here's why your voting is bad for you. We have to start by listening. We have to start by being present. We have to start by finding the pockets of support. I had someone say to me recently, I am a lonely progressive in rural Alberta and I won't put up an NDP lawn sign because I don't know what my neighbors will think. But here's the thing, in this last election, Rachel Notley got a third of the vote in rural Alberta. 25, 26, 28, 30, 35, 40% of the vote in all of these places. So you're not alone. You're not a lonely progressive. And we need to take a page out of what the right does in bringing people together, in training them, in helping them organize, and having them talk to their neighbors. You know, at the Calgary debate, someone walked up to me and said, I have joined a political party for the first time, and now you've got me for 3 years. And I need tools and help from you, because for the next 3 years, I'm going block by block, street by street, neighborhood by neighborhood, to convince my neighbors that they need to change their voting habits. This is precisely how we do that. Yeah. Now, the second part of that question was about blue-collar workers, and I'm going to broaden that a little bit. We have to be very thoughtful, and shout out to Gil McGowan, who has left the race now, but he has really forced us to think in a good way about thinking about who NDP voters are. And Gil's argument is, look, we're losing out on what he calls working people. That's partly true. But there's a bunch of different ways to cut this. We're much more popular with women than with men, so we have a gender gap. So we have to think about how do we appeal to men and women about this. Recently, this is a change in the last election. The NDP has become tremendously popular with ethnocultural communities, and you know, in neighborhoods where there are a lot of ethnocultural people. So that's been a very welcome surprise, but then we have to ask ourselves, okay, what about others? And so there's a number of questions we've got to get to. And on the blue collar piece, I think that the one thing that we have to remember is that we've always been the party of working people. And when we think about our record on things like apprenticeships and allowing people to get into the skilled trades, figuring out how to engage more people in that work, that's an area of strength that we haven't really gone into. And then the final thing I'll say on this front is when we talk about people living outside of the major cities, one of the real issues here is around property rights. And what is fascinating to me is how the UCP basically takes these folks for granted, assumes they'll always be with them, and has launched a full-on assault on people's property rights. So the coal mining from the previous question is part of that. The inability for you to put a wind turbine on your own farmland or solar farm on your own land. Now you can't do it anymore because the UCP in Edmonton has decided that the view is too pristine and you don't have the right to mess with the view on your own land. These are issues where I think we can really start talking to folks and saying, how can we help you achieve what you want for your own family?
Thank you for those insights. And I just want to say a few in Calgary Glenmore told me they wouldn't put up a sign because they're worried what their neighbors would think. But then guess what? They did, and 3 others put their lawn sign. So you never know what your neighbors
And you won.
And I won, yes. Landslide in Calgary Glenmore.
It wasn't exactly a landslide, but next time.
I want to go back to affordability and economy.
Yes.
And this is a question from Katie in Calgary. Thank you, Katie. What will you do differently from other politicians to get urgent projects like affordable housing, to shovels in the ground, cleaning up orphan wells, or getting a high-speed rail system operating, which every provincial government has been studying since at least the 80s?
The beginning
Good
of
question.
time.
Yeah.
Great question. So my record on this is really that we were able to do this in Calgary over 11 years. We had the largest investment in the road network, the largest investment in public transit, the largest investment in green spaces and parks that we had ever seen. And I'm very proud that over 11 years, every single major project we did in Calgary came in on time and on budget. So this is critical work. But the first element that was asked about was affordable housing. And this is one of the things that we need a step change in how we think about this. And I've been saying this for years. We put in, Calgary put in Canada's first community-based action plan on poverty, then on housing, then on mental health and addiction. So these are things I've really been focused on for a long time. And we politicians love approving 150 units of affordable housing and then we go and cut a ribbon. In Calgary alone, we're probably short 5,000 units of affordable housing. That's probably an outdated number now because that's from when I was mayor. You're building 100, 150 at a time, you're never going to get there. And so not only do we need, and some of our competitors in this race are saying, well, if we just have public money for affordable housing, that'll change everything. That's certainly an important part of the solution. But we also need the private sector to step up, not necessarily with deeply subsidized housing, but with increased housing supply to keep rents down. So we have to make life easy for them. But the thing I worry about is the current craze for building housing supply without looking at the whole system and investing in the affordable housing end of the spectrum runs the risk of increasing the supply of housing, but increasing the supply of unaffordable, unsustainable, sprawling housing. So you need smart regulations to do that. And tonight, just before we sat down, the City of Calgary passed the blanket rezoning, which is the right thing to do in my opinion, but it's a small part of the solution. The City of Calgary's affordable housing plan is excellent, and it has a lot more in it than what we've been focusing on this blanket rezoning piece. And you kind of have to do all of it all at once. And that's really the critical piece that we've never really gotten there on. We have to invest more in public transit. And so as this government, first of all, throws away federal money, I wouldn't even say leaves it on the table, throws it away, you're not going to be able to get to that step change on housing. As they threaten the Green Line, you're not going to be able to get anywhere on public transit, which is really required, especially in the bigger cities. They're just not thinking about the future. And now they've gotten all excited about high-speed rail, which is great. But why are they doing more studies? The studies have been done. So if you think that we need it, fund it instead of hiring yet more consultants. And if the studies show you that it's not going to work or it doesn't make enough money, let's just have that conversation with Albertans. But instead of just studying it to death and pretending like it's a brand new idea that you've come up with and icing out the private sector proponents who are ready to go, this is not how you move forward. You know, this is just kicking the ball down the field. They have no intent of actually building this, and Albertans deserve better than that.
Thank you. I have more questions. This one is a little off topic, but I think it's an interesting one. This is Deborah from Edmonton. As the Alberta NDP leader, how would you counteract the flow of misinformation coming from the UCP government?
This is a hard one, Deborah, and thank you for highlighting it. Because, you know, I talk a lot about the need for a more positive politics, right? For Alberta, for all of us, not against. But one of the things that we also need to do is we need to call out the misinformation, the gaslighting, the lies. We need to call it out every single time. We need to call out the motive every single time. And in a world of fractured media, in a world where it's harder and harder to get our messages out, we need to figure out how to use these tools in order to get there. You know, I often joke, but it's true, that somehow I still have more followers on social media than the Premier does. But that also means that people are interested in getting news sources and they're interested in getting information directly from us. And quite frankly, as the Alberta NDP, we have to resist the urge to get into the social media spat of the day, but we have to use the tools that we've got in order to communicate directly with Albertans. And one of the best things about the membership numbers being so high is we now have 85,000 evangelists, 85,000 people in the province who can now spread the word to their neighbors as well. And building that out in a world where you don't have mass media and everyone sits down to watch the same newscast every night is a trick for every politician, but it's something we've got to learn and be better at.
Thank you. I'm gonna take you back to, actually, I think I have another question here.
This technology is really slick here.
I know,
These
look at
questions
us.
are just coming in on your iPad. It's pretty awesome.
It's amazing. I have Edwin.
And notice they won't let me see the questions, so I'm just going forward.
It's just to me.
All right, Edwin.
It's a good segue. Edwin from Calgary. How are you going to maintain momentum in the movement? Will there be opportunities for member input in policy?
Oh, Edwin, what a good question.
He's our friend.
Thank you.
Yes.
So, for the last 8 weeks, 8 weeks ago yesterday that I launched my campaign.
Yes.
Full of trepidation, asking myself, why in the world am I doing this? Do I have it in me to be able to be back in this world? Because I wasn't planning on this. I was going to help people like you do a good job. And in the end, enough people said to me, look, Naheed, you're not good at very many things. but you are good at this. And right now is no time for bystanders. The stakes are way too high. So we have to, together, make a move. And that's how I ended up doing this. And I have been overwhelmed over the last 8 weeks by the movement, by the momentum, by the excitement, by the energy. It's filled me with energy that people are saying we can have a better Alberta. But here's the problem. You guys are just about to deal with a bill in the legislature that is going to extend the election another 6 months. It's not a conspiracy theory. There are reasons for it. I would have gone 6 months in the other direction, just because I believe in democracy, but that was what makes us different than the UCP. But that means that there's 3.5 years. And when I say that, people suddenly go, oh, I can't survive 3.5 more years of this, right? But we're going to be a good opposition. We're going to call them to account. We're going to make them change and reverse course like they did on the low-income transit pass as much as possible. But the hard part, now getting to Edwin's question, is how do we maintain that momentum? I say it's spring in Alberta and the water is flowing. How do we be the conduit for that water for the next 3 years? And the critical thing is for me to be focused on that election and to help all of the members starting now focus on that election and how this is an existential moment for Alberta, and we've got to build and build and build and build to getting there. Now, as for the question on members and policy, I have learned a lot over the last 8 weeks about the party. Things I never knew, things I was maybe surprised to learn. And ultimately, we need to understand that those 85,000 people who put down their $10 and joined the party also are super smart. It's another difference between us and the UCP. We don't treat them with contempt. We think they're smart. And they're experts in their own lives. Everyone's an expert in your own life. So we need ways to bring in better voices, more voices, stronger voices on policy. Now, at the end of the day, as with every political party, the leader and the caucus have to have some judgment. And ultimately, the leader has to have some judgment. The leader has to set the direction in a way that makes sense. But I promise that even if people are not going to always get what they want, that folks, you'll always be heard. You'll always have a fair hearing for your ideas. Many of them will be accepted. And ultimately, we will always act according to the values and the ethics and the morals that we personally hold and that our members hold. And that is my pledge to you. I will also say that there have been a lot of questions raised to me around some of the internal workings of the party. The famous one is, what about our relationship with the federal NDP? But there's lots of others on the role of members, on the role of committees and caucuses, how things come forward, how they're voted on, all of this. I didn't think that I'd be spending a lot of time dealing with the internal mechanisms of the party, but I do know how to do it. I'm good at this sort of thing. This is kind of what I do professionally, helping organizations run more effectively. And so over the next little while, we're going to have conversations about this, but the critical thing is we're going to surface the discussions. So this question about the federal NDP, everyone has asked me about it all over the province, and it's always been bubbling under the surface. And at some point, you just got to make a decision and move on. And so what I want to do is give people the mechanisms and the opportunities within the party, if I'm successful, to make those decisions, to make decisions based on the right information, and then move on and continue to build this unified movement.
Okay. No, thank you for that. So Naheed, guess what? We're receiving a lot of questions on healthcare and education.
Imagine that.
So we will get there. I just want to tell everybody we'll be there until 8:15.
We're going to go an extra 15 minutes?
Until 8:15.
I want to know, and I should ask the behind the scenes people, the huge crowd, the massive control room we have here, which is Ryan and one other person. I want to know from you guys, and feel free to yell the answer, how many people did we lose when the puck dropped?
Not many.
Not many. You all are still here. Well, hopefully you've got another screen with the game on.
But not many is the answer.
Yeah.
They must be from Calgary.
They must be. But in any case, yes, we'll go until 8:15. Absolutely, no
Okay.
problem. We want to get to your questions. And please remember that this will be recorded. It is being recorded, and people will be able to watch it as well if they're, obsessed with other things like their kids' soccer or mowing the lawn or apparently a hockey game.
So I'm going to wrap up some questions on energy, and then we'll go to healthcare and education. So Jason from Okotoks has a question on the environment and oil and gas. So just some context here. I do think we have good regulations in oil and gas in Alberta. but many are not enforced.
Yes.
Because we have a government that's not directing the Alberta Energy Regulator to do its job.
Yes.
We're also seeing this theme of a government that is constantly meddling in our public agencies. You mentioned the ISO. And we're seeing the appointment of partisans and friends on the regulator, on the boards.
Universities, regulators, you name it.
So for the Alberta Energy Regulator, I mean, I'm in the House, we're in session, and I hear the Energy Minister saying that we have a good regulator because the industry tells me so. So, you know, I guess my question is, and this is part of Jason's question as well, what steps do we need to take in order to achieve regulatory reform and enforce environmental regulations in Alberta?
Well, first of all, we have to enforce the regulations. And, you know, there's two particular ones that have come up a lot. The first is the polluter pay principle on abandoned and orphan wells, and why we're allowing companies to skirt their responsibilities. And in fact, the Premier lobbied before she was the Premier and has continued to talk about perhaps a $20 billion bailout to keep polluters from having to pay. The other, of course, has to do with the payment of local property taxes to mostly rural municipalities who are really suffering because people aren't brought to bear to actually have to pay their bills. Now, there are a lot of folks, I don't know enough about the Alberta Energy Regulator's internal workings yet. There are folks who say it is a captured regulator, that it only operates for industry. I'm not going to go that far. But I am going to remind everyone that the point of an arm's length regulator is that it has to be arm's length from government and from industry to make the right decisions for everyone, understanding that the resources are owned by Albertans. They're not owned by the industry, they're owned by Albertans. And so we have to act in the best capacity of Albertans. And when I was mayor of Calgary, even though we owned an electrical utility, the city of Calgary often appeared before the Alberta Utilities Commission, sometimes in opposition to what NMAX wanted, because we felt no one else was speaking on behalf of the consumers, on behalf of the citizens. And so we need to ensure that all of our regulators are appropriately arm's length, they're appropriately staffed up by merits with super smart people who know what they're doing and who are going to act in the best interests of Alberta as a whole. And often that means saying yes to industry. Sometimes it means saying no, but it means working within an environment where the smartest decisions can come forward. And I know that sounds a bit pie in the sky, but it's not hard. Jurisdictions around the world have figured out how to do this. And you know, I'm not suggesting that these organizations are full of cronyism or anything like that, but we have to make sure that they are entirely merit-based. And to me, that's critical.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the first healthcare question.
Sure.
And I do think a good public healthcare system is a good economic policy.
Of course it is.
So this is Joey from Calgary, and the question is, should you become Premier, do you have any thoughts on how we could resurrect Alberta Health Services without having doctors leaving this place?
My gosh, this is such a hard question. Just today, Najwan, you will know that you got a 3-inch thick bill thrown on your desk for the new health regulations. I can't even remember what the
Bill 22.
Bill 22, but it's about the reform of the healthcare system, not the regulations, the actual legislation. So I'm going to take 10 steps back. Since the beginning of the pandemic, we have been talking about how the Alberta healthcare system is at the brink of collapse. I need to tell you, in many places in Alberta, it is not at the brink of collapse. It has collapsed. And the only thing that's keeping it going is the endless hard work of the people who work in the system, who are literally using Band-Aids and duct tape and their own backs and their own sweat to be able to make this thing work. These are highly trained professionals who can go anywhere. And the government seems to have forgotten that. They fight with them, they demonize them, and they forget that if they leave, the system gets even worse. So part of the problem is systemic underfunding. So part of the solution is money. We got to find the money. Now the good news is when you're the mayor, you don't have any money. And so your whole job is to find the money, and I'm pretty good at it. But there's something deeper than that. And that is about respecting the people who work in the system. Whether it's the racialized women mostly who work at the front lines, the healthcare professionals, everything from pharmacists to respiratory technologists and everyone else, or the nurses or the doctors, the paramedics, the administrators, the folks who work within the system. We have to start with a real basis of respect and say, well, you work in the system every day. How do we improve it? How do we make it better? You're the one who's there every day. Instead of demonizing them and thinking of them as costs to the system, we have to think of them as partners because they're the ones who deliver the services. But we have to do so in a way that's really smart. So, we've talked a lot, for example, in family doctors and primary care about a new model for reimbursement of the family doctors, and we do need it. But in the last 48 hours or so, we've actually seen a story out of Ontario rather, that rosterizing, which basically means instead of paying the doctor for every visit, you pay the doctor for how many patients they have. And what we've learned in Ontario is the regulations were poorly written because if you can't get into your doctor and you go to a walk-in clinic, then you can be removed from your doctor's roster. I don't think anybody was expecting that. But it's a financial incentive because if you go to the walk-in clinic, nobody gets paid. So the doctor says, well, here, I'm not getting paid. No one else is getting paid. So we've got to get those pieces right. But we have to work within best practice and the people who work in the system to get it right. But I want to say one other thing. So, and I don't know if you've got a question on mental health. If you don't, I'll come back to mental health because I want to talk about that specifically.
Yes.
But here's the challenge we've got. If you ask the Premier, what's the problem with the healthcare system? She'll talk and talk and talk and talk. And she's like an onion. You've got to peel off the layers. And when you finally get to the core of the onion, she might say to you, we spend too much on management in the system. Now, every study shows that AHS spends less on management than other places, and I am an expert in complex organizations. So I would argue to you that sometimes red tape and bureaucracy are caused by too few managers, not too many, because nobody is empowered to make a decision. So these are more complex questions than she gives them credit for. But here's the thing I don't get. If you're going to build 4 layers of management in 4 organizations, how's that going to reduce the cost of management? Obviously, it's not. There's lots of rumors in the system that there are studies that show the percentage going to management is going to double or triple. So again, she's taking us for fools. She's moving the pieces on the chessboard so it looks like she's doing something instead of addressing the real issues. But the problem that we're going to have is when we form government, inshallah, we cannot turn to the people in the system and say, you've just gone through a wrenching, horrible transition into these 4 different organizations. Let's do it again. So part of what we need to do is understand that we're going to inherit something different. We're going to start with the basis of respect. We're going to start with the basis of appropriate funding. But using those 2 building blocks, we're going to try and figure out how to improve this without hurting the people who work in the system more than we already have.
I feel like you have some thoughts on mental health. Do you want to share
I do,
your thoughts?
actually,
And
because
it's a great segue with healthcare, too.
Because, we're creating 4 new Alberta Health Services. There's going to be acute care, so that's the old AHS, which might be renamed Alberta Hospital Services. It'll be about hospitals. Then primary care, which is about family physicians and nurse practitioners and people in the community. Then continuing care, which is about long-term care centers. And then this new thing called Recovery Alberta, which is about mental health. Now, it is not unheard of to separate mental health out from the rest of it. And if those of you who've been in Alberta for a long time, you might remember ADAC, which was the Alberta Mental Health and Addictions Commission a long time ago. The problem we've got with Recovery Alberta is that it is, number 1, siloing mental health away from physical health. Number 2, it is focused only on abstinence-based treatment. Now look, abstinence treatment works for a lot of people. Maybe it works for most people. It doesn't work for everybody. And you cannot have someone in treatment if they're dead. So you have to be able to have the harm reduction in place. You've got to be able to take people through their own life journey until they're ready and willing to do the treatment that's going to make a difference for them. And right now we've got this very narrow view of what recovery looks like. Abstinence-based treatment, that's a fancy way of saying stop using, stop drinking. That is the solution for you. And as I say, it's probably the right solution for a lot of people. And And I'm told in partisan politics you're not supposed to praise the government for anything, but I will say that increasing the number of funded treatment beds that people don't have to pay for is a really good move. But it's got to be part of something much more than that. So if folks don't know, if you're not from Calgary, you might not know, that I made the cornerstone of my third term as mayor the creation of Canada's first community-based action plan on mental health and addiction. We all know the headlines. We know how many people we lose to drug poisoning every year. 2.5 times as many people as when the UCP started what I call the failed Alberta model. We lose every month almost as many people, sometimes more people than British Columbia, even though they've got a higher population. Our per capita rates are much higher, and it's not because there's more people suffering from addiction. The rate hasn't gone up. It's because of a toxic drug supply. It's because of the lack of good harm reduction in the community. So, but beyond that, there's something much deeper, which is 1 out of 4 of us will be formally diagnosed with mental illness in our lifetimes. 4 out of 4 of us will struggle with our mental health, every single one of us. You usually by 3 o'clock in the afternoon when you're sitting in the legislature. But we don't have a system to really help people through that. And the Calgary Community Action Plan is really good. It's called a community of connections. And it's all about creating connections within the community so that people can stay well and not get ill. So when they are ill, they can get the help when, where, and how they need it, and that everyone can be safe in the community, both people suffering from addiction and mental health issues, but also those of us who encounter them on the street, on the train, on the bus, wherever. So I'll tell you that change is possible. So I always used to use a thought experiment, and I used to say to people, imagine if you are seeing someone in mental health crisis, in your loved one in your family, in your home, or even on the street, and you phone 911, and you hear, hello, 911, police, fire, or ambulance. Well, which one do you pick? Probably not fire. Ambulance, maybe, but with crowded emergency rooms, you might just be sending your loved one to sit and have a psychotic episode in an emergency room, which is not a safe place for them until they get sent home. And if you call police, that may help make the situation more safe, but it may actually make the situation less safe. So what do you do? So I always said, can you imagine if we lived in a world where you called 911 and you heard police, fire, ambulance, or mental health? And that was just a fantasy. It was trying to get people to imagine a new system. Well, guess what? Since last November in Calgary, if you call 911, you hear police, fire, ambulance, or mental health. And there is a team of mental health first responders who will go and assess the situation and connect the person with the services they need. They have saved hundreds of lives. And here's the thing now, Joan, as a policymaker. Do you know how many people the City of Calgary had to hire in order to create a mental health first response team for the whole city?
How many?
It's fewer than 20. Oh. So when you think about the size of the city and the budget of the city, a very small investment has saved hundreds of lives.
Absolutely.
And we need to be ready to be systemically thinking about better things that way. And I'm just not sure Recovery Alberta is set up to do that yet.
It is a complex problem that needs complex solutions.
Sometimes simple solutions.
And sometimes
but you've got to understand the complex problem to get there.
Absolutely. I just want to note that we have over 1,800 people still online on a hockey night.
Still watching on a hockey night. Way to go,
amazing,
folks.
Yes. It's 8:07, so I really want to get to 2 questions and then we go to the closing. So Deborah from St. Albert, she's asking, what is one of the first changes you would make to support the challenges of public education in Alberta?
I would be nothing. Nothing. If I was not a product of the Alberta public education system. You've often heard my story, folks have heard it, that I grew up quite poor in Northeast Calgary. And every success we've got in our lives in my family is because of the public education system, because of public transit, because of public libraries, because of public pools, and we always knew the public healthcare system would be there for us. But in education, we are so lucky that with the vision of Peter Naheed and others, we created one of the best public education systems in the world. And now when I talk to parents and students and teachers, the things I hear are horrifying. So just last night, I was talking to a grade 4 teacher, actually she's a grade 6 teacher here in Edmonton, 34 kids in her class, of whom 5 have significant emotional and behavioral issues. So she's got to spend a bunch of time regulating those 5, and the other 29 are losing out on that education they need. Alberta has the lowest per capita student funding in Canada. We should be embarrassed of that. The ideological curriculum that was put in place is not working. They canceled the grade 6 provincial achievement test, which should have been this week, because they were embarrassed that the results were going to be terrible. You can't mess with the system like this. Certainly, we need to fund it much more. You know, the Calgary Board of Education had enough students join in September that they had enough students for 22 new schools. They have 1 in the capital plan. So we've got to do fund it a lot more. We've got to respect folks a lot more. But I want to say one thing. This young teacher I was talking to last night, she's only been teaching for 4 years. And she said that in her school, her principal had to give them a budget presentation, and one of the slides in the budget presentation said, "No one is coming to save you.
Oh gosh.
You're on your own. You got to figure this out." And she was so demoralized. And she said, "I could be doing anything. I could be doing a different job.
That's so sad.
But then what's going to happen to my students?" And so I just want, and I'm sorry I've criticized the UCP so much, there's to be criticized for, but we have the model for how public education works. It has to be properly funded. We have to fund not just teachers, but resources in the classroom, including EAs and speech language and all of those things. We have to ensure that every child has a chance to succeed, and we have to ensure that the curriculum sets children up for economic, social, and community success as citizens going forward. We got to take the politics out of it. We've got to do this right. But what I really want to say is to that young teacher I met last night, it's not true that no one is coming to save you. It's still 3.5 years away, but help is on the way. We know what to do, and when we form government, inshallah, we will do it. And we will make sure that we rebuild the best public education system in the world for every single kid to be able to live a life of dignity and opportunity right here.
And there is complexity in the classroom. So this is part of diagnosing the problems, right? So thank you for that, Naheed. I want to go to a question from Julian Edmonton. So if you become premier, what's the plan for cost of living? Will there be a plan to gradually increase Alberta's minimum wage?
Yes, absolutely. So Alberta's minimum wage is now the second lowest in the country. And I think one of the challenges that we've had, and maybe the UCP will increase it, maybe, but in a time of huge inflation on basic needs, it's extremely challenging for people to live. And so, you know, one of the things I'm very proud of is Calgary's anti-poverty plan. It's called Enough for All. And it's been renewed over the last many years. Our friends at Vibrant Communities Calgary steward that. And it's all about all of the things we need to do in order to ensure that people can live a life of dignity and get out of poverty. Part of that is housing, part of it is subsidies like the low-income transit pass that the UCP tried to kill. Part of it is about education and the opportunity for people to improve their economic well-being. And part of it is to ensure that people's wages are going up. And so I don't know the formula yet because I don't know what the UCP is going to do. But I think what's important is to ensure that the minimum wage isn't a political football, that we have an escalator with the minimum wage that allows it to go up so that people can still live a life of dignity. Will that mean doing a big change to the minimum wage early in a new NDP term because it's gone far behind? Maybe. Perhaps the UCP will do the right thing. But it means really building that escalator in place so that people can live a life of dignity. Can I talk just for a second about the low-income transit pass?
Yes.
It hit me in the gut so hard when I saw that the UCP was thinking of getting rid of the funding for the low-income transit pass. And the conspiracy theorist in me asks, why were they doing that? And was that an attack on me? Because I've talked about that program for so long and I'm so proud of that program. And they did reverse it the next day. But this is how petulant and petty they can be. Because either, there's only two answers here. Either they had no idea how important this was, or they were doing it to score political points on me, and I'm not even in the House yet. Those are kind of the only two answers. So they're either incompetent or they're malicious, or maybe both, who knows. But I remember when we passed the sliding scale low-income transit pass, which means if you're very poor, at the time, you could pay as little as $5 a month for your transit pass. And there's a story that I often tell, and I've checked many times to make sure it's true. A woman came to buy the pass, and it was $45. So she put $20 bill, $20 bill, $5 bill. And she said, I'd like a transit pass, please. And the cashier took the $5 bill and gave her back the 40. And the woman hadn't heard that this had changed, and so she didn't know what was going on. And she said, explain. She said, well, because of your income, you only have to pay $5 now. And the woman kind of swallowed hard and looked at the $40 on the counter and decided what to do. And she handed $20, she put $20 in her purse, and she handed $20 back to the cashier and said, could I have 4 more? And what this meant was for that family, they'd been sharing a transit pass, the kids were missing school, people weren't getting to work on time, they weren't getting to doctor's appointments. And so the change in the trajectory of that family for everyone having their own transit pass, so small. It cost, for Calgary, it cost 1/20th of what they wasted on the Turkish Tylenol. But the impact that you're having on people's lives is unbelievable. And the reason that project actually ended up being a bit more expensive than we thought is because the projections that we had of how many people will sign up for it were completely wrong. There were many multiples of numbers of the people who signed up for it. And we did that in 2015, 2016. So a lot of folks were saying, oh, it's because of the downturn in the economy, there's more unemployed people. Nobody goes from being a production accountant in an oil and gas company to 50% of LICO, $5 a month transit pass. What it really meant was that there was a huge number of our neighbors who were living lives of extraordinary poverty who we didn't even know about because they were living lives of complete isolation. And this little program, this transit pass program, which comes with fair entry to other city recreation facilities and things like that, was their chance to participate in the community again, to be able to know that they had a reliable way of getting to work so they could get a job, or a reliable way of getting to school, where they could get to their doctor's appointments and get better so they could participate in the economy again. This stuff matters. And what the UCP tends to forget is that this is not about politics. It's not even about policy. It's about people. And our job as public servants is that the people are giving us, even for a second, they're letting us hold their dreams and hopes and fears in our hand just for a second. And we then have the ability to do something with that. And I think that's what this government continues to forget.
It changed life, for sure. So thank you for that. I'm going to move to closing, but there's this beautiful story / question from Randy.
We'll go a couple minutes long. Thanks, Randy. And
then you can really, it's a great segue actually to your closing here. So I'm going to ask you to just blend it together. So Randy says, years ago, you were mayor, and I was working in Calgary at 3rd Street East and 7th Avenue.
Okay.
A train arm was broken, and my partner and I were directing traffic in almost unbearable heat. You stopped and checked on us and made sure that we're okay in the heat and asked if you could do anything to help. Thank you. My question is, can you transfer that caring leadership to leading the province?
Absolutely not. The model is not there. No, that's so sweet, Randy. I remember that day and I remember your service. And I think that for us to be able to value the work of public servants, for the work that people do to build their communities every single day. That's what really matters. You know, if you've ever heard me speak before, you've heard me use the Sanskrit word seva. Seva means service. It means selfless service. And to me, our community is built on that kind of seva. Whether you're getting paid for it as a public servant directing traffic, or whether you're just looking after your neighbors every single day. And politics today has become so angry and so divisive. It's on purpose. It's designed that way because people know that anger motivates folks to vote. But the thing that's been the most, and you've heard me say this before if you've been following the campaign, but I'll wrap it here. And I'll say the thing that's been the most exciting for me is when I jumped into this campaign, before I jumped in, as I was deciding, one of the questions I had for myself is my style of politics out of style? Am I out of fashion? I'm often out of fashion. But because things are so angry and divisive, is appealing to people to try and build something better just not done anymore? And what I've been excited about over the last 2 months is this massive movement that we built is built entirely on a feeling of community and on a hope that we can be better. You've heard me say that it's impossible to have small dreams under a sky that big. But that's really what this is about, giving people permission to think bigger and think better and think about community and think about what we can do. So, the slogan of our campaign is For Alberta, For All of Us. And when I wrote that, I thought that's how I would say it, For Alberta, For All of Us, because we have a government that's not acting in the best interest of the province and everyone in it. But the power of that slogan is that tiny word for, F-O-R. Because for so long we've been trained to be against, to be against Ottawa, to be against the Prime Minister, to be against vulnerable children, to be against the LGBTQ community, to be against newcomers, to be against environmentalists, to be against the oil and gas sector, to be against frontline workers and teachers and nurses, to be against each other. And what's learned in the last 2 months is that Albertans are bigger and better than that. That Albertans want to be for. We want to be for something. And so to your question, Randy, that's what we got to do. We got to use everything we've got, our everyday hands and our everyday voices, to inspire people to be for and to be for something better. And that's our job. So I will sign off by saying one more time, For Alberta, For All of Us.
Thank you, Naheed. That was a nice, uplifting ending. And our time together is coming to close here. And I want to extend a huge thank you to you, Naheed, for your insights and vision and for sharing all that. And I want to thank everybody who came online and shared their thoughts and questioned. And it is your engagement and your thoughtful question that will help us shape this future together for all of us. And while we couldn't address all the questions that came tonight, we're hoping you would continue and keep the conversation going and stay in touch and connected with all of us. And please share your feedback on this session. The more we know, the better we would do. And I believe together we will be shaping a future that is for all of us. And let's keep working together for a prosperous, affordable, and sustainable future for Alberta. Have a good night.
And thank you, Najwan. Thank you for your seva. Thank you for being a great host tonight. And as we sign off, the most important question, what's the score?
What is the score? Ryan?
Hold on. I actually know the score.
Oh, they're actually looking it up. I thought we would just end with what's the score, but let's find out.
Well, let's find out. You want a bit of suspense. 1-0 Oilers.
1-0 Oilers. Go Oilers.
Go Oilers.
Good night, everybody.
Have a good night.